Thanks for tuning in to the Diaphragm Dynasty. I'm talking about a topic right now that a lot of people might have forgotten about, but every time you hear their music, you remember exactly where you were when you heard it. A group that was phenomenal vocally, one of the best uh, vocal group artists of all time. Now, this is Shy. Now, Shy back in the 90s, probably the early 90s, they had this impressive run. They had this song that was undeniable, that If I Ever Fall in Love Again, that song was great vocally. It's one of the few songs that I've actually liked the acapella better than, the regular version because their voices were so amazing and they were so in tune with their other voices. They just had a great collection of talent. Um, but unfortunately it didn't reached to the levels that we would have predicted it would have went to, especially with the talent that you had. And it was one of those telltale signs of talent alone won't get you there because we know that talent needs collaboration. We know that talent needs likability. So you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not liked or if you're not seen in the greatest favor, sometimes that won't put you up to that next level. And not saying that Shy had this situation, but just speaking in generalities about the talent that you might have. And if you're not liked, you have to do everything correct. And I'm not sure if Shy did that, but apparently I guess they didn't do that because they didn't make it past, the first album was legendary. And then once they went along, they kind of, fizzled out. Even though the music might have been the same, but they didn't get the same promotions. They didn't get the same marketing that they had once before. So, but nevertheless, if you had a soundtrack of the '90s, Shy had to be on it with that. If I Ever Fall in Love Again, especially the acapella version, because that version is what really showcased their talents. You didn't have to worry about the production. The only thing you have to worry about is the vocalization, which they did amazingly. But their first album, had great songwriting, and of course their talent was amazing as well. But they had songwriting from Carl Martin, which was a member of the group as well. But um, and I'll get into the possible issue with the one writer in a little bit. But that first album was self-titled from the lead single "If I Ever Fall in Love Again." They had songs like "Baby I'm Yours," "Comfortable," "Sexual." All of these songs were great. And just the production on these songs. I know I talked about "If I Ever Fall in Love Again" acapella like being better, but the production on this was very 90s esque, and it was towards the middle of that 90s R&B, you know, peak period where everything in the 90s, if you released a song, it was pretty much going gold at least. And they had just a magic touch back then with the production. So Shaw was no different in that aspect because all of these songs, if you go back and listen to them, are legendary. And if you're around for that time period, which I was younger, but I listened to the album probably 10 years after it was released, and I felt like it was great music, especially the top tier songs in there. But what happened with um, the problem with the writing portion, and I talked about most of the songs was written by mostly two people in the group or mostly Carl Martin. So the problem with that is when you get towards you're writing for four people. So when you get into the group deeper, and you get into more of your catalog, it seemed like the writing became stale or became the same. Like I talked about before, it's about collaboration in this game. So, going to go get a Babyface or a Teddy Riley, who was all hot back then and still, pretty hot now. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. You could have got, the R. Kellys back then or anybody to write for you to help you get to that next level because you got it that far and it's great with the "If I Ever Fall in Love Again," but you still have to build upon that. You can't just rest on your laurels from that one aspect. And I felt like they didn't reach out to enough collaborators. I don't know if it was the investment piece because, like I talked about before, it's four different people you're splitting the pie with. So a lot of people are not going to want to invest because they feel like they're barely making it or barely getting to where they need to go to. So, but sometimes you have to take the risk because there's no reward without the risk. And I feel like they should have reached out to more writers, to more producers, definitely, because you have to invest in your sound, for that maturation because you're not going to live off, if I ever fall in love again for perpetuity. It's going to be a great moment in R&B and music, and it's going to be cemented. But everything you do going forward is going to be based on the new energy, the new creativity that you're able to bring, a new sound, because you can't keep stay in that same pocket or the same bag because it's not going to be there forever. Those younger artists who had, you know, relied on sex appeal and things like that. Once you get older, you have to rely on more your vocals and you have to more on your lyricism and things like that. Production, definitely. Production is a huge one and it's underrated. That I think Shy definitely didn't take advantage of. Um, and when I was thinking about this Shy topic, I was thinking about um artists like Beyonce. Beyonce, who had started off a little bit slower, but then she picked up heavily afterwards because she invested in it. She had some of the best collaborators, whether she had the dream writing for Neo, Raphael Sadiq, just great art, Sean Garrett, the Pen Garrett, which I have to cover him pretty soon. Phenomenal writers and phenomenal producers that she worked with to actually invest in herself. And you can hear it in the music. You can hear the richness of the collaboration, the richness of her vocals, because her vocals alone wouldn't be able to get her there if she was going to $500 producers or these low level producers and things like that off the streets. She went to the top notch, the best in the business to get there. And that's what you have to do as an artist. But, most labels don't want to, invest in that, but I think Beyonce had enough resources to get herself there and invest in herself. Because if you invest in yourself, it'll come back tenfold, and you can't go wrong with it. But that's just a tale for artists. And, there's more information today as far as artists being independent and being able to be more financially stable and find out how to eat better in this game because back then in the 90s they hid the information, so it was, unless you were well connected or like I talked about, you had likability, people were able to show you another way. And unfortunately this group didn't, but like I said before, they had great talent, just lacked the resources to expand on what they were, on the talent that they had. So tell me what your thoughts about Shy, and until next time, I'll see you next time.